everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is attorney Jo-Anna Nieves. Jo-Anna, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Brittany. Thanks so much for having me.
I want to talk today about a Biden-era name who has been making headlines over the past week. This feels like a blast from the past. I'm talking about former Special Counsel Jack Smith. During Biden's presidency, he was appointed to oversee the federal government's investigations into Trump's alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election, as well as his handling of classified documents. Jack Smith is now being investigated himself by the Office of Special Counsel. The probe is into allegations that his, quote, legal actions were nothing more than a tool for the Biden and Harris campaigns, and that his legal actions also hurt then candidate Donald Trump. So first, to start off the conversation, as an attorney, what are your thoughts on the probe?
So my initial thoughts is that, wow, this comes way out of left field. It's so long ago. Jack Smith resigned back in January of 2025. The prosecutions against Trump were closed when Trump took the presidential seat. And, he's no longer a federal employee. So the investigation isn't going to lead to much in terms of like some of the most severe penalties that can come out of a violation of the Hatch Act. So I think it really comes from this prompting by Senator Cotton into, let's look into what's going on in conjunction with some of the internal investigations that are happening with the weaponization working group. And here we are, we're pulling people out of the woodwork to explore their decisions they made while they were employed.
Yeah, I want to take it even a step further back here. He's being accused, Jack Smith, of violating the Hatch Act. What does that even mean? Explain what the Hatch Act even is.
Sure. So the Hatch Act is a federal law that really is aimed at targeting or overseeing federal employees and not politicizing their professions. So when you're a federal employee, we don't expect that you are campaigning for a particular candidate and, doing these actions within federal facilities, and that you are not tweeting political content from your work account. So it's really aimed at ensuring that government resources aren't being used and government authority aren't being used to promote particular political beliefs.
And Senator Tom Cotton, he is the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. He accuses Jack Smith of violating this. He's saying that it's very likely illegal campaign activity from a public office. That's what he says Jack Smith's legal actions were. He also called this unprecedented interference in the 2024 election. And I want to read some of his accusations here. And if you could break down the legalese for me. So he accused Smith of trying to rush the jury selection and ultimately the trial of Trump's election subversion case, and that Smith didn't give a good reason as to why it should be fast-tracked in that way. Cotton also said Smith, quote, filed for a procedurally irregular brief with no defense motion pending on September 24th, 2024, which may violate DOJ's 60-day rule before Election Day. This was breathlessly covered by the press in a way to damage Trump. He then also said that these, quote, actions were not standard, necessary, or justified. They were the actions of a political actor masquerading as a public official. So how strong, if at all, is that evidence that he did violate the Hatch Act?
Here's the thing. I think Jack Smith is really going to take the position that even though he hasn't said anything at this point, hey, this is my profession. It wasn't political. He was up against a timeline. If Trump was elected into office, the prosecutions go away. So there is this inherent need to rush the process. And I think what Cotton is saying is like, you went too fast. You kind of like made it seem like this aggression you were taking was because you had a political vendetta and, underlying political leanings that were dictating the way you moved. However, we have to keep in mind that there are legal tools that are available, to lawyers, briefings that are able to be submitted, strategic moves that they make, and if we need to rush a filing, there are maneuvers that can be put into place. And I think that Jack Smith's position is going to be, I was lawyering and I was being an aggressive lawyer, but it doesn't mean that I was campaigning for a particular side.
And if we can remember, both cases that Smith oversaw did result in federal charges against President Trump, but they were ultimately dropped once President Trump won re-election again in 2024. So I am curious how serious you think, as an attorney, this investigation is in the eyes of the law, or is it more of a political stunt? Because as you noted from the top, I mean, Smith did resign before President Trump came back into office. He resigned at the end of Biden's presidency. He's not in office anymore. If you violate the Hatch Act, the punishment is you could be removed from office. You could pay a fine of no more than $1,000. So he could, let's say he is found guilty of violating the Hatch Act. He could be charged a fine of no more than $1,000. But I mean, that's not really a steep punishment. That sounds more like a minor slap on the wrist. What do you make of that?
100% agree, Brittany. It is more so a name and shame thing. This is really about like reputational damage, the stress of being in the public eye and under public scrutiny. I mean, the most severe penalty that you mentioned, removal from your position, is just not even available to him because he's no longer there. So we do have that he could get a reprimand. He could be prevented from serving in public office for about 5 years. But unless this investigation and probe leads to some real criminal conduct that's discovered, falsifying documents or misusing funds, obstruction of justice, it's highly unlikely that there's anything that's going to result in a basis for the OSC to make a referral over to DOJ for like criminal prosecution or more severe penalties. I think this is really about dragging somebody's name through the dirt.
And to that point, you're essentially saying Cotton has a pretty thin case here. Jack Smith might not have too much to worry about. It's more reputational damage. It's more the fact Jack Smith is now in the news. He's making headlines for facing a probe, facing an investigation. Can he counter in any way legally, saying, hey, you have such a thin case here. The only thing you're trying to do is reputational damage? Is that a legal maneuver he could do?
I tell everybody, if you want to take somebody to court, there's always a possibility, right? When you think about defamation of character, and the defense to defamation is this the truth? And is this somebody that's in the public? There are defenses and requirements that need to be met to see whether or not he could actually sue for that. But you see, the president just turned around and sued the Wall Street Journal. So, I mean, there's always a counterpunch that can be made in certain situations. I think that if Jack Smith wanted to take it that far, he potentially could. Would it be worth his time, effort, and resources? Probably not.
And so what do you see coming out of this, if anything? What, as an attorney, are you looking out for next?
I think what I see coming out of this is, obviously the decision from the probe, OSC making the determination as to whether or not there was a violation of the Hatch Act, and then probably leading to a much ado about nothing type of position from there.
And I'm curious overall, what do you think of Republicans as well as President Trump and the Trump administration and how they are using the law? You brought up that President Trump is suing the Wall Street Journal. There's also a probe into Jack Smith. I mean, Republicans have long said that Democrats are weaponizing the government. They weaponize law. They bring up frivolous charges. What do you make of these legal actions?
Think it does support that narrative, that broader narrative, that it is kind of like the Democrats' way of weaponizing the justice system against conservatives. I think that is what their goal is, to support that narrative. But I do think it's almost a monkey see, monkey do type of situation where if we're complaining about misuse of resources and weaponizing the system, here we are kind of probing into something that's not going to lead to much.
Well, Jo-Anna, I appreciate you breaking down this legalese for us, and for me especially, because you made it super clear. And as we have other lawsuits and other stories involving the law, I hope you can come back on and give us your insight and perspective as an attorney. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Brittany.